Hey, good morning and happy Sunday, everybody. Tim from Alpha Bull Trading coming at you with this week's market overview and stocks to watch for trading and investing. Very impressive week last week. The Fed had an opportunity to kind of screw things up. They did just fine. Didn't say anything to really upset the markets. And then we had that strong jobs number come out on Friday. Gave the markets a nice end to the week. Will that continue next week? I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. But I have to tell you, technically, we look pretty strong in a lot of stuff. We've just come in a lot of sectors and indexes, but we've come a long ways in a very short period of time. So I wouldn't be totally shocked if we were to pause and consolidate or maybe even pull back a little bit. But we'll have to see how it plays out next week for in terms of economic data. We don't have a whole lot that it could impact the markets. We've got market services PMI. That could be interesting. ISM non-manufacturing on Tuesday. I think that could be interesting. Factory orders on Monday. Weekly jobless claims, consumer credit, consumer sentiment index, and wholesale inventories on Friday. I mean, nothing all that dramatic that could impact the markets, but we do have some economic data next week. And then we've got again another big week of earnings, and I think there are a lot of names on this list that are interesting and could be important for their respective sectors. Uber, United Armor, right? Cisco, GW Pharma, Roku, right? That's been a big momentum name. Square, Qualcomm for the semis, and Teva, I think, is interesting. Duke Energy. Several names. I mean, the Trade Desk, right? Walt Disney, a lot of big names that I think are worth keeping an eye on for next week. They're not on my trade list, but there are a lot of, we've got a broad array of industries that can be impacted by some of these names. So definitely worth keeping an eye on earnings this week. Let's take a look real quick at the sectors, the individual sectors, and then we'll get to the list of individual stocks. But Dust, the bearish ETF for gold miners, actually still looking pretty weak, right? But maybe finding a base. Gold itself actually kind of got a nice little bullish wedge here and could be looking to potentially break out, which I think is interesting as we have these as we have stocks and indexes sitting there all-time high. So it's kind of interesting that gold is holding up and showing some strength as stocks themselves are holding up. We've got a couple of gold miners that are reporting this week, and that could be interesting for the space. So I think gold and gold miners are worth keeping an eye on. IBB, one of the sectors that was not performing all that well, was in a pretty decent downtrend, and managed to break above the 200-day, managed to break above this little trend line here, and coming up into an area of potential resistance. Now we'll see if maybe we come up there and pause. We have, I think, a couple of, I don't know if we've got any big biotechs reporting next week, but it's coming up into an area of potential price resistance. Maybe we pause and we flag out. It's like I said, it's come a very long way in a short period of time. Would like to see it flag above the 200-day moving average. I think that would be constructive for the IBB. IWM coming up right into an area of price resistance, closed right at that resistance on Friday. If we can take that out with some conviction, that would be pretty impressive. And then what I'd like to see is actually us hold this area as support. Right, was resistance. Let's consolidate. We've had a big move in IWM in a very short period of time. Even if we were to flag here and then break out, that would be, I think, more constructive for the space. But pretty impressive action in IWM. IYT pulled back, tested the 200-day moving average, got a little bit of a bounce, but also coming up into an area of potential price resistance, but a sector that's looking pretty strong. I mean, maybe we come back up, we test this area and consolidate a little bit, but IYT is actually looking pretty darn good. JDST, that is the bearish junior miner ETF, gold ETF. Looking like we may be finding support here. I don't know. But JNUG and Nugget, JNUG is flirting with the 50-day moving average. Nugget is just below the 50-day moving average. If we get those minor reports, earnings reports that come in strong, we could see a nice pop through the 50-day on JNUG and Nugget. Worth keeping an eye on those if you don't have a specific gold name that you're looking to play. I've got a couple of them that I'm keeping an eye on that look interesting. But I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out for JNUG and Nugget Gold next week. QQQ's coming up into an area of, we're sitting at all-time highs, coming up into potential trend line resistance. We've had a big run. We're getting a bit away from the 50-day moving average. Wouldn't be totally shocked if we were to pause, maybe pull back, test that 50-day as support, but impressive action in the Qs. SMH, same thing, all-time highs. We're breaking out. It is impressive. How will it continue? I don't know. Qualcomm could be interesting for this one. This week they report. If Qualcomm disappoints, maybe we get a pullback in SMH. But clearly breaking out, looking impressive. How long will it continue? I don't know. S&P 500, all-time highs, broke through resistance. We are clearly breaking out. How long will we break out for? I don't know. Will this now act as support? It seems to be trying to do that. Could we consolidate a bit here? We could. Let's see what happens, but very impressive breakout last week. TVIX, as one can imagine, there is not a lot of volatility as you have indexes breaking out to new highs. I did try to play TVIX on Fed Day. It didn't work out. Got out for a little loss, but if we get some kind of news event, it takes one tweet, really, right? China can say, "Oh, talks are off," or who knows? Something comes from Trump, and all of a sudden we get a spike in volatility. TVIX, UVXY, always on the radar if the markets start to roll over, but not seeing any indications that that's about to happen, right? USO oil, I think, is worth keeping an eye on. I just saw a headline about fracking being banned in Europe, I think, and that could be interesting. Maybe that gives a lift to oil and natural gas. We'll have to see how it plays out tomorrow, but I did think that was a fairly interesting headline. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the energy space. But, it's been a sector that has been really beaten up. I don't know. We'll see if this it provides some kind of a catalyst here. Aerospace and defense, which has been weak recently, pulled back to an area of potential price support and did manage to hold, broke back above the 50-day moving average. Do have an aerospace and defense name reporting this week that I have interest in. It would be nice to see this sector resume its climb higher. It is at an area of potential price resistance now. We'll see if we can break through, but aerospace and defense is kind of on my radar. Home builders, nice breakout. Near all-time highs. Testing the top of this trend line as potential support. See if we get any follow-through in home builders, but looking pretty strong there. XLB building materials, coming up into an area of price resistance. Steel names actually had a pretty nice pop at the end of the week last week. We'll see if that theme follows through, but this XLB is looking fairly interesting if it can take out this area of resistance. Energy, right, got back above the 50-day moving average and trying to hold above there. We'll see if we can get any follow through. It's been a tough space to try and find the bottom in, but maybe it's here. Maybe we get some follow through. There's some interesting looking names out there in the energy space, some individual charts. So I think you want to keep an eye on that space. XLF breaking out new all-time highs. Financials looking strong. XLI, look at the industrials, just took out this area of resistance. See if that now can act as support. But we've had a big move in a short period of time, right? So, but impressive breakout on industrials. XLP, consumer staples, continuing to consolidate and hold on to the 50-day moving average. Could be building a base for another move higher. Kraft Heinz actually reported better than expected numbers, got a little boost last week. This space still looks pretty darn bullish. XLV coming up into a trend line resistance, had a big move in a very short period of time, pulled back a little bit. See if maybe we can flag out here, or we get just a little bit of a pull and build out a nice little bull flag or something. But healthcare actually at an area of resistance, but we've got some names that are reporting this week. Maybe we break through. We'll have to see. Consumer discretionary, kind of forming a little wedge here, starting to coil up. We're going to get some names reporting this week that could impact this space, but it is trying to hold on to the 50-day moving average. XOP, oil and exploration, trying to test the 50-day moving average, right? Potential double bottom in XOP. I do think a space to keep an eye on. And XRT actually trying to hold on to the 200-day moving average. Look, overall, a lot of the sectors look pretty darn good. Some of them have come a long way in a very short period of time, so it wouldn't be a total shock to see them take a pause and maybe consolidate a bit. But looking pretty impressive out there for the bulls. And maybe we get some of that irrational exuberance. I don't know. And it pushes us, get some kind of a blow off top, pushes us to all-time highs. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying it could happen, especially if you just keep seeing positive headlines about the market every day, right? So, all right. Let's take a look real quick before I jump into the list of stocks to watch. I just want to take a look at one thing. I want to take a look at the T2106 and T2108. It is the amount of stocks over the 40-day and 50-day move, or 40 and 200-day moving average. I just want to take a look at that real quick and see how we're looking there. T2106, T2107. All right, so T2107, we're sitting at about 54. Remember this indicator when we're at 70 or higher, it is when things are probably a little overvalued and probably wouldn't be a bad time to lock in some profits. It's the amount of stocks over their 200-day moving average. It's at 54. It's kind of, fiddle in the middle. When you get 20 or lower, get into the single digits, that's when things are overdone to the downside. And right now we're just kind of hanging out in this 50 area, so not real extreme there. T2108 is same thing. You get to 70 or above, it's probably not a bad time to lock some profits. But we're sitting at 61, so not extreme, not cheap, but not extreme. T2106. McClellan oscillator, kind of fiddle in the middle as well. Not a tremendous amount of fear or enthusiasm out there, just kind of fiddle in the middle. So I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out. You got to admit the sectors look pretty darn impressive, though, heading into this week. All right, let's take a look at the list of stocks to watch. These are stocks that have earnings this week. And we're going to start out with Plug. So Plug is potential, short-term trading, day trading opportunity, maybe even a short-term swing. This does tend to be a pop and flopper. It looks to me like we've got some pretty good price support in the 235 area. Actually, this just pulled back to the 50-day moving average and bounced a little bit. Could be heading back up towards 3 and change test. Maybe you get a pullback into the 250 area or 260, 250 area. Little red to green. Go up and test that $3 heading into earnings. They report earnings on Thursday before the open. So, if they report a good number and report positive cash flow and maybe even a profit, this thing could actually really rip. I wouldn't chase the gap up, but this is a big spot. This 320. If you look back all the way to about 2015, it's been a very challenging spot for it to get through. So, if it were to actually take that out, it could be pretty interesting mover. But I wouldn't hold this into earnings, right? Maybe look for a short-term trading opportunity ahead of earnings before they report earnings on Thursday morning. If you just get a little scalp action up to $3, 3 and change, maybe there is an opportunity there. But just looking for a quick hit in PLUG with some volume. EYPT, so these guys had some news last week. This is another one that can be a pop and flopper. They report, when do they same day, actually Thursday before the open. So it looks like potentially $2 is holding as price support. If you take out 270 with any kind of conviction, you could get a nice pop up into high threes, maybe even a $4 holla. You may have to wait until after they report on earnings on Thursday. Maybe it grinds up into this 270 into the report, but I wouldn't hold it through earnings. Like I said, if they report something dramatic, maybe you get a nice pop after. Then you look for 268 to 250 to hold as potential support. That could be your entry zone after earnings if you get some kind of a gap up. So worth keeping an eye on. EYPT. BHC has had a tremendous run. CEO has bought a pretty significant amount of shares in the 23 and change range. Look at where we're coming up into. This is a big area, $26. Had a huge run already into the earnings. So even if they report a good number, it wouldn't be a total shock to see it pull back, right? So they report a good number, give a good guide, and you get a pullback into maybe the 200-day at $23, or you pull back into $21 could be an interesting spot of potential price support. But BHC to me is more of a long-term hold. I think Citron recently came out positive on these guys. I think put a $40 price target on it. So like I said, if the earnings come out and they're strong and the stock pulls back to an area of potential support, either the 200-day or potential price support around 21, that could be an interesting opportunity to jump in for a swing or long-term hold entry. So that is what I'm looking for on BHC. I have a couple of names that I'm going to be putting down to the pro members that if BHC reports, they report Monday. before the open. If they report a really good number and give a good guide, and the stock gaps up or whatever, there are a couple of names within that space that actually I'm looking for potential sympathy play in, right? So um, that's why I'll be sending that out to the pro members shortly. But the specialty generic space is one to keep an eye on, and BHC specifically for a potential swing or long term hold on a pullback after this big run. OBLN, so look, very speculative name. New CEO, new CFO just announced. They report on Friday. Just did a reverse split. There, you probably noticed there's been some reverse split names recently that have had some pretty nice runs. If these guys report positive, they just paid off, I guess, some long-term debt. Kind of interesting, right? Kind of interesting potential day trade opportunity if they surprise on Friday. Could even get some action heading into the earnings, but I would not hold it through earnings. There is a gap to fill on the daily. It tends to pop and flop. Just looking for a scalp opportunity in OBLN. Katos is reporting on Tuesday after the close and consolidating here right on top of the 200-day and the 50-day moving average, right below the $20 holla, right? I think this was last earnings, right? So it was testing all-time highs, flagging at 25. If these guys disappoint, we could see a pullback. And actually, I got too many damn lines here. Let me get rid of some of these lines. So, if we pull back to 1750 or so, I would be inclined, actually, probably, unless they gave some kind of a drastic earnings report and guidance. If it pulled back into the 17 to this trend line, I would be inclined to dip my toe for a long-term hold on KTOS. Let me just back this out to the weekly time frame real quick. It's not all-time highs. I stand corrected. Apparently, they did a reverse split a while back, back in 2009. So 52-week highs is what it was testing. Where I would really love this thing to pull back to is about $14. That's where I'd really like to get it, is $13.80, $14 for a long-term hold. But may not get that opportunity, may just pull back and test this trend line and see if that holds. If it slices right through that trend line, then there is a possibility it is coming back down to the $14, $13.50 area, maybe even $12.50. So I like this as a long-term hold, and I like it as a potential acquisition target. I think somebody eventually takes these guys out, but that's not why you buy a stock with that in mind. Want to see these guys have just started to report some decent numbers. That's why it's had a nice run. Looking for an opportunity in it. If they report a good number and it gaps up, I wouldn't chase it. 25 likely going to act as resistance. But if it reports a good number, gives a good guide, get a gap up, maybe look for a pullback to an area of price support for an entry, and then look for a retest of the recent highs. But Katos is definitely on my radar. Disney is definitely on my radar as well. So they're going to report this week, Thursday after the close. What I'd love to see is a pullback to 120 on Disney. I'd like to fill the gap on the daily and then test this, what was resistance, have it become support. I think that would be a tremendous entry for a long-term hold on Disney. If they report good numbers, give a good guide, and give all kinds of exciting news about subscribership for their new Disney Plus, then I'm hoping that that's not going to be the case. This could gap up and test that 146 area. But I'd like to see him disappoint. I'd like to see him disappoint and pull back and close that gap down to 120. Right? I think that presents a great opportunity for a long-term hold consideration. It is testing the 20-day or the 50-day moving average, so had a nice little pop on Friday. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but Disney, I think, is worth keeping an eye on if it pulls back and closes the gap as a long-term hold entry. AMRN. Looks like we were holding this, $13.85, $14 as area as support. We are kind of flagging right below the $17 holla. These guys report Tuesday before the open. If it cracks through 17 and up through the 200-day moving average, could get a nice move in AMRN. Worth keeping an eye on it for a trading opportunity after they report earnings on Tuesday. If it pulls back, if they disappoint and it pulls back into this $14 area, see if that holds as support, could be a bounce area. So a couple of ways to view it on AMRN. ATRS, I've been watching this name for so long, and it is kind of coiling up. These guys report, when do these guys report? Also Tuesday before the open. You have had a recent golden cross. You got the 50 above the 200-day. Looks like the 200-day is trying to hold as support. Had a little reversal on Friday. If it can take out 378 through $4 with some conviction, could be a nice pop in ATRS. Just looking for a potential trading opportunity in the name after earnings. APPS, full disclosure, I own it. I've owned it for quite some time from the lower, I think it was even below $2. It's had an incredible run, and it keeps testing the 780 area. Need to take out $8 with conviction. Looking to see what this does after earnings. Now, I don't like the way the stochastics are curling or the MACD. Actually, maybe we found a double top here. If it pulls down to the $6 level, depending on what guidance is, depending on earnings and guidance, this thing could pull back hard. I mean, we could come back and test this 485 area where there's potential price support on a longer term time frame and the 200-day moving average. Now, if it were to pull back to 485, that would be an opportunity, I think, probably for me to try and add, unless they gave some kind of a catastrophic earnings report and guidance, right? So $6. I would look for $6 to act as support. If that failed, the next area would be down here, around 480. So I am keeping an eye on that. If it breaks out over 8 with some real conviction, I could also look to just do a day trading opportunity, a little scalp opportunity on that as well. So looking for a potential add on a pullback, and then looking for a potential day trade on a breakout. So worth keeping an eye on APPS. ATVI at a very interesting spot of potential resistance. They report on Thursday. I want to own this in my long-term hold portfolio. I missed the opportunity to buy it when it was down in the 40s, 41 and change, and now it's flagging out above a rising 50-day. You just had a golden cross. I'm kind of hoping that they disappoint and we get a pullback maybe into the $49, $48 area, and maybe that is the opportunity to dip for a long-term hold in Activision. But I do like the look of it. And if it takes out $58 or $57 with conviction, we could be looking at a gap fill up into the 62, maybe even head up into the $66 area on Activision. More of a long-term hold or a swing though. IIPR. So this is a marijuana REIT name. I think it's important for the sector. It actually just pulled back and tested this trend line. They report on Wednesday after the close. I think it's important to keep an eye on this one for the space itself. Just had a death cross, the 50 cross below the 200 days, so that's not real encouraging. But I am interested in seeing what this bad boy does. I think this has got a fairly small, tiny float. I think it's important for the space, the sector. GW Pharma also is reporting that one's important for the sector. It's been a very beaten up sector, and at some point I think we're going to get some kind of a lift, some kind of a bounce there. I don't know. Maybe this is the catalyst that does it if these guys report a good number. But worth keeping an eye on it. And GOLD, which, Barrick Gold, reporting on Wednesday before the open. I think it's important for the space, right? If it breaks below 16, this thing could be heading back down to the $14.95, $15 area. That could be an interesting spot of potential price support. And if they report a good number, we may get a little breakout here, come back up and retest these recent highs at $20. So I think Barrick is definitely worth keeping an eye on after earnings for a potential trading opportunity. And not only that, but there could be some nice sympathy plays within the gold miner space if these guys report good numbers. So worth keeping an eye on that. And that is it. That is the full list of stocks to watch for the week. It's going to be an interesting week, right? We've got some very interesting levels in a lot of the indexes, and got some interesting names reporting this week. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, I think you still need to be somewhat cautious because we've come a long ways in a very short period of time. So we could, take a pause. We could get a pullback. Oh, you know what else? I just noticed Weight Watchers is reporting next week. WW. That is another one that has a very interesting looking setup, and could be ready for some type of a breakout here. If they report good numbers, give a good guide, we could see a break above 38 bucks. That could put a squeeze on Weight Watchers. Keep an eye on that one too. All right, that's it. Be careful. Make sure you have a plan for each and every trade. Know your risk reward. Be safe, and good luck trading next week.